We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of The Murder Project. Mike and I are back together again, and we are so excited to be bringing you a debrief episode for the Thomas Kelly, Tom Brown case. This has been one that we've been talking about a lot, and we are excited to bring it to you. And if you are new to The Murder Project, the debrief is where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer Mike Smith to discuss these cases further. In the debrief, we will discuss the case from both sides of the aisle, theories that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the debrief is to break the cases down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime we love, but also a little laughter. So let's get the episode started. Back in the saddle again.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Smith, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'd like to start this podcast out by you explaining to everybody why we had such a long break, because it's all your fault.
Yeah, that I should have seen this coming.
It's not your fault, Mike. Mike,
don't
it's
say
not
that.
Your fault.
Don't
it's
say
not your fault.
No, I think it was just a lot of illness and holidays.
Yeah, you're right. And I just wanted to. I figured that'd be a good time to get a Good Will Hunting joke in.
Yeah.
I got plenty more. I'll use them later. But
I really hope so. I'm hoping to come into this with as much energy as possible, because the last couple episodes I was on, I was still recovering in a lot of ways, and there was so much illness that I was just feeling kind of bummed, just kind of physically.
Yep.
But I don't really feel that way. In fact, I mean, I got my taste and smell back. It seems to be back to normal. So overall, I'm feeling pretty good. And this is a case that we've talked about off and on for years.
Yeah.
And one that I know personally several people in Canadian that are also very interested, obviously. And I travel there twice a week.
Yep.
So I see them all the time, and I'm familiar with the area.
Yeah, and you're right. I've had several people that have brought this up, and I've been talking about it for several weeks, and then I got the fever a couple weekends ago, and it wasn't for more cowbell. I was ill, and I don't know what happened.
Literally a fever. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, because I didn't have any symptoms of anything. I just got sick for 2 days, like hardcore, and then I woke up on the third day, and I snapped out of it, and I was like, well, there went my weekend.
I mean, you know what they say.
Mm-mm.
It's going around.
They did. That's true. Yeah, there's something going around.
It's just like, what do they say in the Panhandle when there is any rainfall ever?
Needed the moisture.
We sure did. We needed the moisture.
Needed that moisture. All right. Well, without further ado, let's break into this case about Tom Brown. I think this is one of those cases where when I started really diving into the details of it, I just got more and more confused. And there is a lot of hearsay and there is a lot of speculation. And so I think that in the beginning, we need to talk about the things that we do know for sure.
Definitely, because I have looked into this and we've talked about it, and all I know is the more I talk about it, the more I find myself staring pensively into the distance while my brain is trying to process this. It's not like we're not going to add our own speculation and stuff like that.
We got a lot of that.
Oh, definitely. But yeah, what's a good place to start is, you did a great job getting the layout of like a baseline of what happened with him going missing and all of the pieces of his property that were found later on down to his remains. But now it's time to start jumping in to what I like to call the juicy bits.
Yes, let's see if we can chisel away at some of this. So the story starts out on the day before Thanksgiving, and it's technically November 23rd, 2016, when he's officially declared as a missing person. So the day before, his activities are pretty standard, I feel like, for a high school kid. They are on holiday for Thanksgiving, and there are friends in town, and so all the people in the town are meeting up with one another and, hanging out with friends that they haven't hung out with in a while, going to basketball games, doing all this stuff that we would think normal in the United States, normal teenage kids would do.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so on the day that Tom goes missing, the night of, we know it's 6 p.m., which I've already covered some of this, so I'm going to start at 6 p.m. We know that he was hanging out with his friend Caleb King and then Michael Castletine, which was one of his friends. Now, the events from this segment of the night seem to be the least talked about because there's not a whole lot that goes on. So we know that from 6 p.m. to around 8 p.m., these three guys were riding around together, probably not doing much, just cranking tunes and hanging out.
Rolling the strip.
Yep. And so at 8 p.m., this is when supposedly Michael Castletine leaves and goes home, and there's no other information about him being out that night. Now, what I didn't tell you in the first episode is that there is more information about him and his father that might seem a little concerning, but it was definitely supposed to be in the debrief part. So we're gonna move on. But around 8 p.m., Christian Webb shows up, and she kind of replaces Michael in the vehicle, or in the lineup, I guess you could say, of people hanging out. They jump into her Dodge Charger, and they cruise around, and they listen to tunes. And, one of the things that they brought up in there, and a lot of people, I think, kind of hang on this too much, is one of the songs that Tom Brown requested that they all listen to was that Avett Brothers, No Hard Feelings. And Mike, you know how I am.
I know it's
about the Avett Brothers.
You do, yeah. It's a quality band.
Yeah. They got some good tunes.
They do.
Some of their songs aren't, it's kind of hit or miss, but the writing style of these two guys, solid. And No Hard Feelings is a really good song if you actually listen to the words, and it's about someone who is talking about when they die, what happens to them. When they die, when that time comes, are they going to be ready? Are they going to, and it's a really good song. And a lot of people bring up the fact that this could be a clue in this investigation. But I have to be on the other side of that, where I say, well, if you're going to use that song as a reference, then you could have chalked me up as being suicidal for my whole, because we get on a bender.
Yeah.
And then, dude, I would just make you listen to Avett Brothers tunes for hours.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring that up. That did happen a lot. Yeah. It is a good song.
Around this same time, too.
Also true. Yeah. Wow. Didn't think about that. It's actually been a couple of years.
Yeah.
But, you could do that. Is it brought up in the context that it seemed out of place? Like he made them specifically listen to it? Did he listen to it over and over?
Yeah, the way I understood is that he just said, he's like, oh, I got this really good song, these couple of songs y'all need to listen to. This is one of them. And they may have listened to it multiple times. If I was DJing and I was in Tom's position, I'd have made y'all listen to it 6 times. Because that's just how I get sometimes when I get on that roll where I'm like, hold on. Listen to these words.
Yeah,
listen to this part of the song. You didn't listen to it.
Yeah.
You were talking.
That's true.
I saw you were on your phone. You weren't even listening to it.
That sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah. And I'm like, hold up. Let me just start it over. Let me just start it over.
Start it over.
I'm like, when he brings in, when this part of the music brings in together, I'm like, dude, just listen real quick. I do that.
That is very familiar. Yeah.
And so I feel like that is something that obviously you could look at and you could say, okay, is he trying to get his friends to listen to this song because he's trying to tell them something?
Yeah, like a subtle outcry.
Right, without really telling them, and then he's having this good time with his friends because he knows when the night is over, that's it for him.
Now that we know that he's gone, you can easily get there.
You could.
But if he wasn't, it just would have been a time you guys listened to a song in a car.
Yeah, no one would have even cared.
Exactly.
No one would have brought it up. No one would have said anything.
It very well could be. I can see how they could get there to believe that, but we don't. like many things we're going to talk about, then not enough is known fully for that to mean anything other than he was just trying to show his buddies a song that he liked.
Yeah, like if you get deep, like you have a deep connection to a song and you want to show it to him, like I have a lot of them. And I can do that literally all night. I can just pick a song after song after song. But anyways, moving on. At around 11 p.m., the three teens go to the Canadian Wagon Bridge and they hang out there for a little while. I'm not sure, you brought up an interesting point. I'm not sure what side of that wagon bridge they were actually hanging out on, because you brought up a good point that at nighttime, only one side of the bridge is actually lit up. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking maybe that kind of played into, they're like, oh, let's just, I mean, because you can only drive around a small town so much. I grew up in a small town. I mentioned that a lot in the last episode, I know, but I'm just saying, like, when you're driving around, you're going to hit the same spots over and over, or you'll wait, like we'd wait and then go out of town somewhere and then just be like, okay, when we're driving back into town, we're done. Yeah, and that's literally what they did.
Right, yeah. You're driving through, you go park somewhere, you shoot the biz for a minute, and then you drive back through trying to catch somebody else cruising so you can all meet up somewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. I'm very familiar as well.
And then if that didn't happen, then, they can call it. So around 11:15, all three of these teens returned back to the middle school parking lot, which is where they left their cars at. This is in, sort of in the middle of town. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it just seemed like an easy spot for all the kids, like a central location for everybody to meet at.
Absolutely.
And there is, I brought up in the part one that there is mention of all three of the teens leaving the school parking lot around that 11:20, 11:25 time frame. Some reports say that Caleb left before the other two. Others say that they all three left at the same time. But the reason I wanted to point that out, because I think it's important that we know all three of them, regardless of how the order were, left separately.
That's right.
So that's why I wanted to kind of go over that. And then at 11:28 p.m., Tom used his mother's debit card at the Franck fuel station, the fueling station that is where, I guess you could say, like, Tom's last known location was.
Right, the last time he was seen with his vehicle. And that's the one right when you're going into town that's right next to the Dollar General.
Yeah, it's over on if you're coming into town, it's over on the left-hand side. Yeah, it's that unmanned.
Yeah.
And which they had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just down the hill from that is like the Dollar General, and that's where like the town like really starts to pick up. Like,
everything kind of, starts kind of shooting up right there. And they had cameras at that gas station, but from what I understand, they were not in service at the time. And that is actually very common place at fueling stations. Mike and I used to do some work at some gas stations, work on some pumps and things like that. And you would be surprised, especially at the unmanned locations, places where not a lot of employee type people would be at, that if the equipment fails, just no one knows.
Yeah. No one knows, or they just don't want to pay it.
Or they don't, they're not going to send somebody out there to fix it. They're just going to be like, well, the next time we have somebody go up there, we'll have them reboot the computer and see if they can get everything turned back on.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
And in this scenario, it was not good, because we could have got good information, or nothing.
Or nothing.
For all we know, or nothing.
Right.
So after this is when Tom misses his curfew. So we know for a fact that 11:28 p.m. Tom was at the Franck fueling station. He filled his vehicle up all the way from what his mom said based off the purchase price of the debit card transaction and gas at the time, how much it cost. It was probably his Dodge Durango was on E, and he filled the whole thing up.
Right.
So he was there for a few minutes. So that gives you an opportunity for someone to come by and see him, or for him to see someone pass by and go try to meet up with them, or whatever the case, because at this point in time, he still has half an hour before his curfew it goes into effect. But what happened in that 30 minutes is what, or technically 43 minutes, technically is sort of this whole mystery.
That's right.
This is where the whole story everything that happens goes dark really right now.
That's right.
Like right now, Tom gets fuel, and then after that, poof.
Nobody knows where he goes. Nobody knows who he was talking to, if he had plans, nothing. Yeah, it's completely just open.
Now, we do know from surveillance video that was picked up in the town after Tom disappeared, that there are several people that are, driving through town, vehicles that they can kind of pick up and spot. That podcast that I mentioned in the first one, Unfound, they had a YouTube video where he actually got a hold of the surveillance footage. And I'm going to tell you, whatever you're thinking in your head of like classic black and white grainy footage, this is it.
This is it, yeah.
I mean, it is so hard to tell what is what and who's. I mean, you have to spend some hours like really looking at this stuff and really trying to pick out like, okay, is this Tom's car or is this a deputy's car or is it, And so from that surveillance video, there are two vehicles that look as though they are Hemphill County Sheriff Tahoes. In the videos, it looks like you can see the screens from their computers inside their car are on.
Yeah.
And so it kind of makes it a little more, it kind of highlights their vehicle a little bit more because of the light inside. Like it could be their laptop inside their car. And so we know that there are at least two Hemphill County Sheriff's deputies in town at that time. We know Tom's in town at that time. We know that he was hanging out with his friends. But then after that, there's not much.
Right.
Tom's cell phone at 12:13 pings out for the last time. The ping shows to be over by the football field, the high school football field, which is a little ways away from his location, probably a couple miles inside of town, maybe less than that. But it's not close, and it also wouldn't be in the direction of his house.
Right, yeah, and you made a good point. If there's only two operating towers, and if you're only getting 300 to 500 meter radius to pick up that ping, and from where the school is positioned in Canadian, that is almost the entire town.
Yeah, he could have been anywhere.
Right, yeah. Maybe he did swing back over there. That doesn't mean that was the last place he was. He could have swung by near it.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless, now.
Or he could have been 500 meters away.
Yeah.
In a completely opposite direction, and it would still show in the same spot.
That's right, yeah. Without a third tower to help triangulate, you have no idea.
Yep. So we know that at 12:13, his phone pings out for the last time. This is also about the same time, if I was to have to guess, that Tucker and his mother Penny are trying to get a hold of Tom. They're having this conversation like, hey, have you talked to Tom? No, I haven't talked to him. You talked to him. Let's text him. Oh, he's not responding to his text messages. And then Penny notices, and I think this is a very good observation.
Yeah.
Whichever way you look at it. But it's a very good observation that she noticed that the first message that she sent him just after midnight was delivered to his phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so was Tucker's. And then the second messages were not.
And that was the second message was what time?
This is going to be around that 12:13, after 12:13.
Yeah, I mean, now you're looking at 40 minutes.
Yep.
So from 40 minutes from when he was last seen at the fuel station, and from then to his phone getting a message that's not delivered, which means that his phone was off.
Yeah, his phone was operational and on,
mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden the phone was turned off. But the question is it turned off by Tom, or is it turned off by somebody who noticed that now somebody's looking for him?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is important, because this is going to play into what kind of the direction that we're going to go into.
Right.
As far as what happened to Tom. But either way, if it was Tom himself, he knew that he blew his curfew
mm-hmm.
because he had something in mind. He wanted to go ahead and turn his phone off. But in my opinion, an 18-year-old kid is probably not thinking like, oh, someone's going to triangulate my phone position and find me. I better shut this off.
Right.
Versus someone looking at the phone and noticing someone is looking for this kid.
Right.
I better shut this phone off so the messages don't keep coming through.
Yeah.
And also, you don't have to keep reading the message, what's being sent to the person. You know, if this person knows anything about Tom whatsoever, they're going to know now his mom and his brother are looking for him. Or at the very least, he knows two separate individuals are now looking for this person.
Or the fact that the phone's going off at all.
Yeah.
He's like, oh.
And that would kind of rattle you if you're in a position of, if you're committing crime.
Yeah.
So and you're like sitting there, you're like, oh man, I got to get my head together. Bling!
Yeah, and this is November
Bling!
2016.
Yeah.
So it's anybody that owns a decent phone in 2016 knows that your phone knows everywhere that you go.
Yep.
Maybe not down to the exact location like we just spoke about, but
it knows generalized area of where you are. And the fact that you can't take the battery out of a Apple phone, which is what he had, the best thing you can do is turn it off.
For an Apple phone, do you have to know the passcode to turn the phone off?
It depends. Like on my phone, I have it set up to where if once I shut it off, I can just shut it off. If I go to turn it back on, you can't use face recognition. You have to type in the code.
No, I'm wondering if somebody turned his phone off, do they have to have access to the phone? Like, say, like my phone right now.
Mm-hmm.
If I just wanted to turn it off.
Yep.
And I hit restart.
Mine's
asking for my fingerprint or a PIN.
Yeah.
To turn my phone off.
No, the iPhone. I know mine does not do that.
So you can just
shut it off.
Okay, yeah. So
that's a good deal to have right there because I can take my phone and just turn it off. If you want to turn it back on, you got to put in the passcode. But to turn it off, you can just shut it off.
Yeah. See, I find that kind of odd, but that's
and
nobody's
especially
fault.
5-6 years ago. I mean, it's not the technology is not obviously as good as it is now, but it's still good.
Yeah, it's still good. I mean. But still, that's definitely something I wondered. So whoever it was, what I was getting at, they didn't have to know his passcode or anything to get him to turn his phone off. They could just turn it off.
Yes, I think
whoever it was.
Yeah, I think that is a very good possibility that that's the case because I had an iPhone back then, a 5 or a 6, and I did not have to I could just shut it off.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And even I think my first iPhone 4 was not, there was no thumbprint, no nothing. So it was all just 4-digit code.
Mm-hmm.
So I think definitely during this time, they could have just shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would have been beneficial in the fact that we knew that, well, Tom had to shut his phone off.
Mm-hmm.
But now, guess what?
Now it could have been anyone.
Could have been anybody.
Anyone that knew how to turn an iPhone off.
So after this is when Penny, Tucker, and Tucker's friends start looking for Tom. And based off of the interview that Penny did with the host of Unfound, they are out and they are looking for him quite extensively. They're driving through the town. She's going out to areas that she knows that Tom has been to before.
Yeah, checking the local haunts.
Yeah, all the places that she might think they could find Tom because she brought this up several times. It's very uncharacteristic of Tom to miss his curfew.
Yeah, that is a big thing that she brings up, and really, that's exactly the type of thing that we need to know, right? That they need to know right now. He's not the kind of person to miss curfew. He had plans to enjoy the holiday with his family.
Yeah, and the fact that he doesn't miss curfew kind of, I think, speeds up the process of when they start looking for Tom. Like if it probably would have been me whenever I was his age, my mom would have probably let that ride for a little bit because, I wasn't the most punctual as far as my curfew went, but I'd show back up.
Right.
And it's kind of like one of those things you get used to.
Exactly.
And so you're like, oh, he'll be home within the hour. And that could have delayed all of this process another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, what have you. But in Tom's case, that's not what it was. Tom was always on time, or she pointed out that it was usually before. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't ever an issue like, oh, Tom's, he's hitting the door, cracking the door open, running through right at midnight. Like I made it. Like
yeah.
He'd stroll in. And from the looks of this, if he's at the gas station at 11:30,
he was going to get
there. He's just going to go home and he's going to have half an hour.
Yeah. He's going to get there 25 minutes to burn.
Yeah, exactly. And then Tucker's there with his buddy, and they're playing Xbox. So, I mean, assumingly, he probably would have jumped in with them. Nothing big going on. Next day's Thanksgiving. Like, it's everything about that seems pretty normal.
Right.
Aside from the fact that he doesn't show up.
Nope.
So we know that after they go and start looking for him, they are unable to find his vehicle or anything that might suggest where he might be. But one of the odd things is if you go back to those surveillance videos in town at 1:30 a.m., I believe it's around 1:30 a.m., they catch a glimpse of Tom's car going out of town, back towards like the Higgins area, the Lake Marvin Road area. They have his vehicle pointed in that direction going outside of town.
Yeah.
And so the reason that they say that that is Tom's vehicle is because of the shoe polish on the windows. That's why they say, because otherwise it's very hard to kind of distinguish what colors are, like what vehicles. I mean, and it's quick. Like you got to stop the vehicle. I mean, you got to stop the recording real fast.
Yeah.
Try to see if you can see the vehicle. But on this particular instance, they say they know it's Tom's vehicle because of the shoe polish.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to point that out in the part one, because it's that they feel very confident in saying that at this time his vehicle is leaving town.
Right. Going back the other way.
Which is odd because this is 2 hours after he was filling up at the gas station.
Right.
So during this 2 hours, was his vehicle driving around town?
Mm-hmm.
Or if it wasn't, then it has to be parked somewhere that most people would not be able to see it, because there's 3 people looking for Tom at this time.
Mm-hmm.
None of them see his vehicle. So I would assume that it's not just driving around town.
Yeah. It's not parked somewhere obvious either.
Yeah. Someone would have seen it, but nobody sees it. Then it drives through town. And yet again, no one sees it. And this is going to happen a few more times where you're like, golly, people are looking for this kid.
Yeah.
And somehow this vehicle is on the main road that goes through the town.
Mm-hmm.
And yet not a person ever sees the vehicle. And so during this time, 1:30 is pretty much the last time that we see anything from Tom's vehicle until 5:56 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
At 5:56 a.m., the vehicle is seen back out on the outskirts of town, going back towards the same direction.
Right.
Okay, so it drives in that northeast direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's seen around 1:30. And then at 5:56, it's seen in the same area going the same direction, but it was not seen coming back through town previous to that.
Yeah.
Now, after this is where the vehicle obviously gets dumped, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be daylight soon.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the last time the vehicle is spotted going through town, and it's going in the direction of the water treatment facility where the vehicle is located.
Right.
Now, between 11:30 and 1:30, and then 1:30 to 1:56, it's pretty much, but other than that, there's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing we know about what happened to him or who's driving his vehicle, and you can't see into the vehicle. You can't see if there's 2 people in the vehicle.
Yeah.
I know that from the surveillance video, there are cars in close proximity, but you can't really tell what they are, or there wasn't any significance to it.
Right. And the night before holiday, at 1:30 and beyond in the morning, any car on the road is strange.
Yeah.
In a small town. Because I also grew up for several years in a very small town in the Pacific Northwest. And if you're awake, you're going to notice a car driving down the street.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's so late in such a small town the night before a holiday where everyone's probably had a couple of beer skis and they're trying to get their rest, or they just finished up, watching TV or whatever. I mean, if anybody was up, they would. I'm having trouble understanding how nobody would have seen it.
Yeah.
If they were also up at this time. So that is very bizarre that it made 2 obvious trips through town that we know of just because it's seen driving through it, but nobody else saw it.
Yeah. In the town I grew up in, if anybody's running through town this late, they're like hauling butt home after cracking cold ones with some friends, trying to, sneak back into the house, or it's going to be someone that's just randomly passing through the town, but which you would know. In the town I grew up in, at the time I was there, I could have told you every single person I knew. I could have told you what vehicle they had.
Absolutely, yeah.
All my friends,
same.
I could have told you their parents, both their mom and dad, what vehicles they drove.
That's it.
Their grandpa that always went up to the general store and had coffee. I could tell you everybody's vehicle.
That's right, yeah.
And this I would feel like would be the same situation, but for some reason,
nothing.
Nothing.
Yep.
So When the next morning, this is when Christian and her father jump in his helicopter, which is super legit.
Yeah.
Like, the dude's got his own helicopter. He's like, hey, baby, you want to just take the helicopter up? Said no one I ever knew.
Yeah, no kidding. That's definitely some good walk around money.
Yeah, he definitely got some there, and good for them. But I will tell you that was good to have in this situation, because when they went up in that helicopter, they flew straight to the places that they were hanging out at. They went by the wagon bridge. They flew out to Lake Marvin, which to me seems a little bit weird, but I don't live there. So it also could mean that is a place that would be frequented by the people who live in that town. They're like, hey, let's cruise out to Lake Marvin while we're out here, you know?
Just even saying that sounds correct.
Yeah.
You and your buddies, you're in your, late high school, and you're like, man, there ain't nothing to do. You gonna go kick it at the lake?
Yeah,
let's go.
Let's cruise out there.
Let's go out there, smoke cigarettes, and drink some Mike's Hard Lemonades. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then you're going to be in this situation where you're like, hey, we've got a little bit of time to burn. It's 14 miles outside of town.
Yeah,
it's going to take some time to get there.
Where else is there to hang out?
Yeah, nowhere.
It's just not in Canadian.
The people that you would assume would be there are very limited, isolated.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about, the fuzz showing up and ruining your good time, or someone's parents seeing you, drinking a Mike's Hard Lemonade. That's or, right, whatever that they stole out of their parents' cooler out in the garage.
Some wine coolers, yeah. Get it.
And so they drive over that area, or fly over that area, and then they fly over towards the water treatment facility. And if you look at this area on a map, the water treatment facility is off the main road quite a ways, but it's also past some baseball fields, and then there is a fenced area and a gate that you would have to go through to get in there.
That's right.
And Tucker brought up the point that when he was riding around with the deputy, when they went to look, he went to help look for Tom, he noticed that gate was open. And he wanted to say something about it, but he said that's when Pine Gregory was like, hey, man, I got to go get ready for my shift. So I'm just going to dump you out of the vehicle. So they didn't go investigate that area. But my point about that is that if you are just a passerby in that town, there is no chance that you would know that was back there. And there is no chance, probably, that you could stumble across, that you would just happen to take that left-hand turn coming back into town. Or if you're going based off of the surveillance video, that right-hand turn at the end of town,
right?
It's a rodeo arena over there, right?
Yeah, it's like a rodeo center, like an activity center.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe that you would just accidentally come across this place and be like, oh, I should drive through this gate, so not knowing what's on the other side of that gate.
Are we implying that gate's supposed to be closed?
Yes, according to Penny at the time, what she said is that it was normal at that time for that gate to be shut.
Right, so it's not free access back there. You can't just exactly when you're saying you can't stumble on it. It's supposed to be controlled access.
Right.
Yeah, someone had to have a key.
And not only that, but what do you know? How do you know what's on the other side of that?
Sure.
What if you're opening a gate to go dump a vehicle, and then you get in there and there's some dude's house is right there?
You roll up on Farmer Fran's house.
Yeah, and his dogs are going crazy, and he comes out with a shotgun.
Exactly.
He's about to start laying some lead down.
Yeah, he's like,
you don't know
property. Are you the FBI? Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I knew they were listening to my phone conversations. God dang it!
Yeah. This is a free country. Yeah,
it's America.
So that is strange. So even Tucker mentions that.
Yeah, that the gate was open and it was not supposed to be open. It was not usually left open.
So let's pause right there for just a second. So Pine Gregory is a deputy in Hemphill County, and he shows up to help start the investigation. Is this in an official capacity?
Yes. Yeah. When Peggy calls the sheriff's office, this is who they send.
Okay. But is he in uniform?
I don't believe so.
Because when he tells Tucker, was it?
Yeah.
That he needed to go get ready for his shift, was he not already ready?
I guess from what I understand, there was a 45-minute gap from the time that Penny made the phone call to the sheriff's office to the time that he shows up. So the assumption that I have is that he was at home and he was the on-call deputy.
Sure.
So I'm thinking in my head that either they don't have a holdover deputy for the night.
Okay.
Or for some reason this person was not called to go assist.
So I guess what I'm really wondering is was he in uniform?
That I'm not sure of.
Because I know that when I worked in the city, if I was called to work, I had to be in uniform, and I'm sure it was the same for you.
Absolutely. We
You can't work in an official capacity unless you're in your uniform if your job requires you to be in that uniform.
Unless you work at a place that's so small that they just don't adhere to most of the rules.
I mean,
which is also...
Right. I'm not saying that's
getting to some of that.
Yeah, exactly. It is a really small town. We don't know. Do we know the schedule? Has it ever been released? Like, who's supposed to be working right now?
See, that's the thing. I don't know exactly what the shifts were that they were working, and that would be an awesome question that maybe we could ask Penny if we get a hold of her to see if we can kind of close up some of these gaps we have, because I was the same way. I had a take home ride, but if I was called out of my house, I could just walk out to my car, but I had to be in my uniform unless I was going to a class.
Yeah, unless
but you're right. But then they don't want, if you're going in between work and class and you're in your patrol car, but you're in your civilian clothes with your gun and your badge clipped on and all that stuff, they don't want you out there running traffic and doing all that. No, you're supposed to go from school to your house and basically put your blinders on. Like, if it's not something that needs immediate assistance, you go home.
Yeah, I guess that would be something really cool to find out, is if he was in uniform or not. Just because showing up to do something in an official capacity, even though it's very, very late at night, and not being in uniform strikes me as odd, even for a small town. Yeah. I know it's possible. I know it very well could be what it did happen. It just seems shady to me. And I just can't think a way around it. That just would be weird if I called to report my missing son, regardless of their age, and just a man showed up in like his jeans and a t-shirt. I'd be like,
he's like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
I'm like, the son's missing. He's like, dang.
That's too bad.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
He'll probably show up.
Yeah, he'll probably show up. Hey, man, I don't know what you were doing before this, but I'm like 10 in, you know. I was trying to sleep. I gotta start a turkey early.
Pretty much housed a 12-pack before I went to bed 45 minutes ago, and I'm not doing too well right now. You got any gum?
You got any gum? It's just a regular question. Don't read into it.
Yeah.
So then they go searching for him for several hours.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pick back up. The chopper flies over towards the water treatment facility.
And in a grouping of trees, which is also, it's dark when the vehicle is parked. So it strikes me odd that once again, you're in an area that only the people in the town would know about. And then the vehicle's parked in a grouping of trees, which would make it harder to see.
That's right.
And it's back off in this road, and they see it in the helicopter, and they're like, hey, that kind of looks like Tom's vehicle right there. So they call it in to the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office goes out there, and they're like, boom, there it is. We got his car. So upon the immediate kind of inspection of the vehicle, that's when they find what I thought was a drop of blood, which it's reported that way several times, but it was actually a smear.
I've read it both. No, I have read it both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it could be a drop, it could be a smear. Yeah, but that's also really important.
That is really important. Was it a drop of blood on the driver door, or was it a smear?
Yeah, because if it was a smear, it could have been hit by somebody. It could have been a droplet of blood that was hit by somebody, or it could have been a transfer.
That's right.
Into the vehicle from someone else.
Don't worry, it's not blood spatter.
Not this time.
Not this time. Don't at me.
You ain't getting me on this one. So they find that spot of blood, however it is, which is later confirmed to be Tom's.
That's right. And
then they find a single 25 auto shell casing in the vehicle. I have heard that it was found in the front seat, and I've also heard that it was found in the back seat. So that is one of the things, and I think Penny even said in one of her interviews that she heard originally that it was up in the front, and that later on people were saying it was in the back. But this is how this thing gets so crazy.
It is.
Because everybody's talking and nobody knows. Like when you hear stories about people, and it's like, it drives me crazy when someone starts saying something and I'm like, what is this based on?
Right.
How do you know this?
Yeah. Where did you hear it, and why do you think that is the way it is?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that sometimes irritates my wife, because when people are telling me stories, I immediately just start asking a lot of questions not to be rude.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested in knowing, like, oh, how did this?
Yeah, you want the details.
But most of the time, people just want to tell stories and not be interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I rub a lot of people wrong that way, but it's not intentional. I'm curious.
Yeah, I interrupt a lot of people too. If that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, we both. Yeah, I think you so more than me sometimes, but we both do it.
Wow.
But that's
that. All right.
Is that a hard hit?
No, man. No,
you're just thorough, man. You're just thorough.
I mean, if somebody had to take the hit, I guess it could be me.
All right, cool. I guess we'll move on with that.
Thanks, man.
Mike took the gut punch.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. But after they look into the vehicle, this is the thing that strikes me odd, because this is also another area of the story that I've heard two different things. The deputies and the sheriff, Nathan Lewis, at the time said that the reason they released the vehicle so quickly is because there was no evidence that could be found in the vehicle aside from what we've already talked about.
Aside from a drop or smear of blood and a single shell casing for a firearm that Tom's family didn't have and nobody knew he would have had.
And the person who's supposed to be driving the vehicle is missing.
Right.
Aside from that.
Yeah. Was there anything about tire marks? Because if you parked a car there and whatever happened and you're no longer there, did you walk off? Did you drive off?
So the good thing is that when the vehicle was called in, everybody that had anything to do with that car just drove out there.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was something that was not thought about at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, everybody's like, well, what are we going to do? And they're like, well, I don't know. Why don't we take about 3 or 4 vehicles and just drive them all right up to the vehicle?
Mm-hmm. Thinking he was going to be sleeping in the back or something?
Yeah. Contaminating any further evidence that you might have had on the ground as far as footprints or tire tracks or anything else like that goes.
Yeah, because that'd definitely be the first thing that I would look at if I was the one that drove up on this. I would have stopped as soon as I could see the vehicle,
and I would have walked.
I would have walked, yeah.
Yeah, and then if I would have found something crazy, or if I'd have seen the drop of blood and been like, oh boy, guess what? These are my footprints right here. No one else gets to come over here until a crime scene gets here.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody gets to walk around over here. No one gets to bebop around and look and see if they get... Nope, this thing's done. Like, this area right here is shut down.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk back to where my car was, and I'm going to step in the same footprints that I did on my way out there.
To the best of my ability. And I'm not like some CSI, hanging out with Grissom and, solving crimes in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I was just a regular B cop, and I can tell you for sure that I would not just drive straight up.
Yeah, these are things even we know.
Yeah, and I get it. It's something that you find a lot in the world of true crime, the smaller law enforcement's department, especially when you're branching out into like county coverage and stuff like that in these really small towns. It's not the lack of education. It's a choice.
Yeah.
You're not
It's the lack of effective policy that not only you put in place, but you implement. And you say like this, hey, this is the way that we do these things.
Yes. Is it just... At the time, just a missing high school kid? Sure. Does that happen probably more frequently than everybody likes to think? Also probably sure. But still, he's missing. It's a big deal. It's official at this point. And now you're finding the car abandoned in a place that anyone could look at and say, that's shady.
This is very suspicious.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's not in the car, the location is suspicious. The timing is suspicious. There's blood in the vehicle. There's a shell casing in the vehicle. The vehicle is parked in a location where it was obviously meant to be hidden.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, well, I don't know, man. What do you think?
I don't know what you think. I don't know. You know what? Just give it a cursory glance. Give it back to the family.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Exactly.
That's basically
that's what
happened.
they did. Yeah. So in what I was saying earlier is that former Sheriff Nathan Lewis said that the vehicle window was down in the Durango and that there was so much dust inside the vehicle that they were unable to lift any fingerprints or, let me correct myself real quick, even try. So from what I understand, they did not even try to fingerprint the vehicle when it was first found because they said it's just too dirty inside. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I grew up with a bunch of people, and even myself, like we lived out in the country. There was tons of dirt roads. There's tons of caliche roads. And a lot of our vehicles did have a pretty good solid layer of dust inside the vehicle.
Sure.
So was it like this? Or was it like other people stated where it looked like the inside of the vehicle had been cleaned?
Was it? Yeah, because that's something that's also been said.
Yes, the investigator who does, which I've got some, I got some things I want to say about that, but the investigator said that the inside of the vehicle looked like it had been cleaned. Even when he later states that he used luminol in the vehicle to see that it looked like there was blood everywhere, but I'm like, so which one is it?
Right.
Does what Sheriff Lewis say, is that correct? Is there this layer of dust inside the vehicle that makes it almost impossible to lift fingerprints? Or had the vehicle been cleaned? Because I would like to think that in the beginning, it would have been that the vehicle was dirty because that gives the deputies a reason not to have to do an extra step.
Sure. Now, that being said, we've also talked about how difficult fingerprinting is.
Yes.
So I would also say that if it is very dusty or dirty, you know what? Maybe I would even want to come to the same conclusion. I'm not going to be able to get any prints. There's so much dust that even if they did touch it, they're not leaving fingerprints. All the oils and stuff that would be left behind to get a print, it's picking up road dust.
Yep.
But what do we know about the vehicle being thoroughly photographed?
Nothing I know of.
Exactly.
Yep.
This would be a time where you would start exterior, take a bunch of pictures, and then go into probably the driver to start there, take a picture, every angle, just dump so many pictures, it'd be insane on the little film card. Just take so many pictures because, you know what? And even put that in your report. Man, it was so dirty. There was no way I was going to get a good print. I couldn't see a place where I could get a good print. So they would probably even be like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I would still photograph the bejesus out of it. There was blood in there. Let me tell you, if you open my pickup truck door and there's blood on it, it's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
So if it's there, something happened.
If it's there in a vehicle that's dumped outside of town next to a water treatment facility for a missing kid, let's go ahead and assume that that's going to probably be something we need to look into and not return the vehicle by 4 p.m. just before quitting time.
Yeah.
They're like, call old Bobby.
Yeah.
Tell him come pick up this vehicle and just drop it off at the parents' house. We're done.
What about that blood? He's like, what about it?
What about it? We already looked at it.
Yeah.
Then when we looked at it,
yeah.
And that's it.
But they did take a sample.
Yes.
Because it was later confirmed to be. So at least we know that part was done.
At least we know they did that.
There's also a good chance that a lot of this investigation hasn't been released like there is in any time for anybody who knows the world of true crime. There's a good chance of that because there's so much that we don't know. They might be keeping what they do know under wraps. Yep. But still,
one of those situations where like there's certain parts of evidence we don't want to release. That way, if we interview somebody and they say something that only the killer would know,
right?
Then we know what they know when we know it. They're like, sounds good.
They're like, yeah, that sounds perfect. That it's just now that they have found the vehicle and they know that he's not in it, and there is a mysterious 25 auto shell casing and blood. They're just like, so, I don't know.
Yeah, so let's get into now the parts of the investigation where things start getting a little more screwy.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is when basically Penny's like, okay, they dropped the vehicle off at her house. And she's like, y'all are done with it? And they're like, yep, got all we could get from it. And she's like, well, what's the deal? Like, what's going on? And they're like, I don't know. What we think, and this is where we kind of get into some of the he said, she said parts of it.
That's true.
Even more so, because I feel like this whole thing is that.
It's turned into that for sure.
For sure. Because the more time that goes on, the more the stories just get to keep on spinning out. They're just spiraling out into space.
It's the worst kind of the telephone game.
Yeah, yeah. So now what Penny says is that when she has this conversation with the sheriff and the deputies, she's like, okay, well, what could have happened? Where is Tom? Like, what do we know so far? And what she said was that basically the sheriff's office, and the sheriff in particular, was like, well, he probably just skipped town, and, he probably ran away with somebody, and, he could have ran away with another dude, and it could have been somebody that he met online, and he might have been gay.
Yep.
And they're like, wow. So where'd we pick this information up at?
Where did all that just come from?
Yeah. Where'd you guys pull that from? That would be, that as a parent, I would be like, hold up. So you think my son skipped town with somebody he met on Tinder and he's gay?
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically. And they're like, how did we get here?
And for those of you listening who think that we are saying that to be funny, we're not. That's something that actually happened. Mm-hmm. This is something that is reported to have been said to Tom Brown's mother.
Yes. And then later on, they asked the sheriff about it, and he's like, I didn't say that. I just said, well, maybe he skipped town.
Yeah.
And then they come out and they say, well, it's also possible that he committed suicide.
Right.
And she's like, okay. And then this is where I think you kind of get into some of that where the sheriff's very defensive about some of the things that he supposedly said, and also on Penny's side. But the sheriff made a comment saying that he's like, well, when I brought up the possibility of suicide, the mother said, yeah, it could have been a suicide. But that doesn't mean that she's not saying like, yeah, he probably committed suicide. In a field interview type situation, if someone says, is there a possibility that he might have committed suicide? And you're like, well, I guess it's possible, but then the next part would be, how do we get there?
Yeah.
At this point right now, you can't even get there. You can say like, well, maybe he committed suicide. Okay, well, did we search the water treatment area thoroughly to see if we could find a body? That I don't know.
Yep.
I know that at this point in time, they're saying, well, he might be a runaway. Well, maybe he committed suicide. Maybe he jumped on a dating app. Maybe he's gay. And he skipped town. He's living out his life footloose and fancy free in San Francisco. And you're like, what? Like, how? What are we talking about?
So, in Texas, he's 18 at the time of his disappearance. So, only because he still shares his family's dwelling can he even be considered a runaway.
Yes.
Because in most states, he would not.
He would not be considered.
Because he's 18 years old.
Yep.
Legally, he's not a runaway because he's considered an adult and can go where he wants.
Yeah, and we've talked about this where criminally 17 in Texas, family code is 18
That's right.
in Texas, but he's already 18.
Right.
So any of the stuff that we've talked about before now does not go.
So let's look at the two things that were brought up. One, he ran away, regardless of who and where and why. He did it. If he did run away, why didn't he take his car?
Yeah.
He just filled it up on his mom's dime.
And then dumped it.
So that makes...
And in the beginning, this is one of those things where it is odd because they say inside the vehicle, we did not find his phone. There's no wallet. There's no backpack. There's I don't even know if he had a wallet. I mean, I would assume he did. No one ever talks about it.
That's right.
But they don't find anything in his vehicle, and I think that's where it's easy to jump to this conclusion about, well, maybe he ran away. But if that's the scenario, then I wouldn't even have brought up the suicide, because if it was a suicide, I think there's several things that are important to talk about that. Number one, if this is a teenager that is seeking attention through suicide, why would he go through the trouble to not be found?
That's exactly right.
Why would he not have shot himself at the school or something like a teenager would do to get attention? I'm just throwing that out. I'm not saying.
A place to be found.
A place to be found.
Yeah.
But that's not the scenario.
No.
So that's where I get to the point where I'm like, well, how did you bring the suicide part in if in one breath you're saying he probably ran away? Look, his backpack's gone, his cell phone's gone, his keys are gone.
Yeah, and
then they're like, or he committed suicide, and they're like, boy, that's a big jump.
That is a big jump because generally you don't get to say things like that unless you have a body.
Yeah.
Like that's huge.
And another thing that we used to do at the sheriff's office that I worked at is we did not speculate with the victims, relatives, loved ones, whatever.
Yeah, especially
you didn't walk up and you're like, hey, do you have any information you can give me?
Yeah.
If the answer is this is the information I have, or no, I do not have any further information, that is where the conversation ends. I don't go, hey, you know what I think happened to him?
Yeah.
I think he probably hooked up with some dude on Tinder and left town.
Yeah.
That's so ridiculous. Like, everything about what they were doing is so ridiculous. You don't speculate with the family.
And certainly not in the first day.
No. When you know nothing about nothing at this point.
Right.
And then as the days roll on, these theories about him skipping town kind of start to fall apart because there is no activity. He has no money.
Yeah. No money, no vehicle. His phone is off.
Yeah. His phone's never turned back on.
Mm-hmm.
And as the days turn into weeks, they're noticing his phone is never turned back on, and he has spent no money and has no cash.
Yeah.
So how is he traveling?
Yeah, that deflates pretty quickly.
Yeah. And if it is that, well, he had to have been with another person, still, show me a way we can get there.
Exactly.
Show me some sort of way that we could get there, and then maybe I'll start traveling that road with you. But at this point in time, there's not anything.
I don't think in 2016 you can just disappear like that.
No.
No, I just don't think even if that was your plan, you're going to leave footprints. In fact, a great deal of law enforcement investigations are based on that evidence alone.
Yeah, and the fact that
the first thing they're going to look for is your phone activity, your financials, who you associated with. So the thought that if maybe he even did run off with a stranger he met on the Tinders that was also a guy, which how did they get there?
Yeah. Once again, I feel like they're just pulling stuff out of the air.
That's like they took a town rumor and they're like, well,
what if?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably gay.
Since we didn't find him.
I know I keep saying it, but I can't understand how you go there. Because number one, how's that, even if he was gay, who cares?
Yeah.
And how is that important to what we're talking about in this circumstance?
Still missing.
He's missing, yeah.
That's what we're trying to fix.
And you also have to realize this is a small town kid who has grown up in a small town and been around small town his whole entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And from what it sounds like to me, he was a little bit of a mama's boy, which is fine because I am too.
Same.
So are you. Yeah. And so he's just going to leave. And when I moved to Amarillo, this town has 200,000 people in it.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved here, I was terrified because this to me seemed like the largest place it was the largest place I ever lived, but it seemed like the biggest place like I ever had to interact in, drive around. Like everything about this area scared me when I was 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone would have told me, like when you left to go to the military, you're probably like, oh boy, what am I getting myself into?
Oh man, that was lost as an Easter egg.
Yeah, not like, oh well, I'm a senior in high school. I guess I'm going to blow this popsicle stand head on out.
Yeah, I flew.
It would have, in my opinion, I think it would have terrified him to leave that area with nothing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, go ahead.
I was when I left a very small town, just getting through the Denver, Colorado airport was a challenge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to look at that, like, yeah, where would he go? How would he go? Where would he have, like, the nerve to do such a thing? You can't get there easily.
No.
It's just a wild guess, and it's a really inappropriate thing to do, especially in the first day of an investigation for a missing person. Somebody's child who still lives at home.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. So as time marches on, we have little to no evidence that's found. There's just kind of this same speculation that's moving around. And then on January 27th, 2017, so Tom went missing on the 23rd of 2016. This is January 27th of 2017. That's when his backpack's found.
So 2 months later.
Yeah, a couple months later, his backpack is found. It is found by a oil field worker out off that Lake Marvin Road, kind of where a road tees or splits off right there, coming off of that road. It is like 15 foot behind the fence in these trees. And I was thinking to myself that someone's probably thinking like, how did somebody find that?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you got to take a pee or something like that, and you're just going to hop over.
I mean, that's fair.
And you're going to go out into the area just a little off the road. I would have probably just opened my door, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, he had like some greasy tacos or something the night before and he was actually going to pinch one off or something. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? Either way, I do know this. I say that to say this. I do know that the guy that found the backpack, would have had no connection with Tom.
Right, he was cleared of all
Yeah,
that.
they ruled him out pretty quick.
It
and
was literally just a circumstance. He went out there for whatever reason and was like, hey, there's a backpack here.
Yeah, and so there was nothing there as far as that went, but the fact that he found it back there, and obviously it was put in a place where they were hoping, whoever put it there, that it would never be found. And it was found, and from what the sheriff said, there was an indention in the ground where the backpack had been sitting, so it looked like it had been there that time, that 2 months or whatever.
Yeah, it was weathered.
It was weathered, molded. The laptop was wet, molded. It was toast. They couldn't get anything off of that.
Yeah.
So we find a backpack, and then now, where does that take us? Because now this whole story about, well, he took all of his belongings, except for clothes, and money, and anything else you would need to travel.
And definitely not his laptop.
But now his backpack, the largest item that would have been in his vehicle that had the most importance probably in it. And not only that, but the laptop wasn't even his. It was the school's. But then they find the backpack, and now we're kind of looking at it saying, like, okay, well, what does this do to any of the theories that we have going on right now? Like, especially the sheriff's office. So he ran out of town. But wait, he parked his vehicle over at the water treatment facility, but he dumped his backpack 5 miles away out on Lake Marvin Road before he left.
Right.
And
To what end and why?
Yeah.
Exactly. No reason. There would have been no reason to put it there.
Yeah. There as far as these two theories go that the sheriff's office supposedly said, and kind of the talk of the town, this backpack being found out there would have been there for no reason. No reason whatsoever, unless you're trying to hide it.
Right.
Why would you be trying to hide his backpack? Or why would he be trying to hide his backpack? Because then a working theory starts to develop where they say, well, what if he parked his car and he started walking? And then all of a sudden, he decided, this is where maybe he's going to be picked up, or he had walked long enough and he decided, I'm ditching my backpack.
Yeah. So he jumped a fence and
walked across the Canadian River.
Yeah.
And this is another good point. When we start getting into where we're talking about Tom walking places, it's November, it's cold, and it's pitch black outside.
Pitch black, yeah.
And not only that, but the Texas Panhandle in general is very flat.
Yeah.
This area is very not.
No, it's subtle. It's hills. It's hills and subtle rolling hills just everywhere.
Yeah, and then not only that, but from the location of where his vehicle was parked to where the backpack was found, he would have either had to walk a long way around, or he would have had to walk through the Canadian River.
Yeah.
That runs right there through the town.
That's right.
This is the reason why the town's called Canadian.
Yeah.
Because the Canadian River goes through it. That is small, but there is usually water that runs through it. We have a piece of it that goes. Yeah, we have a piece of it that goes north of Amarillo, and it's always got brush,
it's so much brush. There's no way you'd be able to get through that in the dark.
And it used to be huge before they dammed it off over in New Mexico, and that thing was so wide and deep that to kind of go across that terrain, it's going to be difficult anyways.
Yeah.
But then put on the fact that it's going to be at nighttime and it's going to be wintertime.
Yeah. I'm thinking there's no way.
There's no way he's walking over there.
No, he wouldn't have made it.
And yeah, so, all right. After that, we have October 14th, 2017. So the same year, about, 10 months later almost. And this is when we haven't got into a whole lot. We're going to talk about Klein investigation. We haven't really got into that a whole lot because we're going to save that for a little bit of the pieces that we're going to tie in towards the end. But Klein Investigation was a company that was hired by Tom's mom, Penny, to help her out because of the things that I've been talking about with the sheriff's office. She did not feel like they were doing a good enough job investigating this case, and she wanted an extra hand. Now, if all of the things are true that she said about what the sheriff's office was doing, I could not agree more.
No, definitely. I would definitely want outside assistance.
Yeah. So during this time, Klein Investigations says that they got a search party group together because they wanted to start looking for additional evidence. Now, this is after the backpack is found, obviously, so they are moving down the road several miles. From what I understand, they wanted to search the Lake Marvin area, but were told that they couldn't at that time because there was some other sort of investigation going on out there into something else, perhaps drug-related or whatever. But they told them that in specific areas, which is kind of sketchy in my opinion,
that does
they could not search.
Yeah.
But they chose an area along Lake Marvin Road, which I don't completely understand. How they got to this point, this is another question I'd like to directly ask his mom if I could, because it seems weird that this location that was in between basically where the backpack was found in Lake Marvin.
So, I mean, it makes sense if they're out there looking for additional evidence and remains to me. I'm getting there in my train of thought. So even if we did take the long way to look at, he did, let's say in this scenario, he did park the car and then walk this tumultuous journey to get there, which sounds absurd, but let's just keep going. And he did ditch the bag where he did, and he was going to kill himself. I mean, they're out there searching for any additional evidence in the area, as generalized it is, and possibly remains, because this whole time, people would be looking for that.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually, now that you say that, I can jump on that, because you're going to do one of two things. You're going to find evidence, or you're going to close the door.
That's right.
And you're absolutely right. That is a good way of doing that. Either you find something or you don't, and at least we can shut the door on that particular area.
Right, because the backpack alone, it was weird to find the backpack there anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So they get this search party together, and according to Klein Investigations, the only people that knew where the search party was going to be exactly was the sheriff's office and them. They did not tell anybody in the town where it was going to be. They had rustled up several I think it was a couple hundred volunteers, if I'm not mistaken. It was a lot.
There's
a lot of people. I can't remember the exact number, so I don't want to guess any more than I already have. But they rustled up some volunteers, but they didn't want anybody to know where it was because they didn't want anybody to go out there beforehand.
Right.
For whatever reason. Either to start looking before or to, do something.
Do whatever.
Yeah.
So, plan evidence.
Penny even says that she did not know where the search was going to be either. And so around 24 to 48 hours before the search was actually supposed to take place, Klein Investigations shot out an email to all the volunteers and said, meet in this general area. And then when they got out there, he said, this is the area that we're now going to search. And he showed them the area. So he says that it was only them and the sheriff's office that knew about it. So if anything kind of nefarious happened, there would have only been two sources, supposedly.
Supposedly, of course.
24 hours, in my opinion, is still a long time to do something if you needed to. Especially if you decided to be a part of the search party. And if the person that is responsible in this disappearance wants the best inside details about the case, it would be beneficial to them to go ahead and sign up for that search party because they would know everything in real time, the same as everybody else did, including the law enforcement agency that's investigating the case.
That's correct.
Well, within 10 minutes of this search starting, a lady that's walking, that's also later cleared to not have anything to do with this, just a random person that's out on this search party, comes across the iPhone that's laying in the bar ditch, and after I recorded the episode, I thought, people are probably wondering, what's a bar ditch? Because that's what we, you're driving home. You're driving home from the bar and you hit the ditch, and we call them bar ditches. But it's just the side of the roadway, the mowed grass in the ditch.
Ditch. They cut it out so the roads will drain when it rains.
Exactly.
That's it.
For some reason, we call them bar ditches. And so, anyway, so she's walking this bar ditch, and she finds an iPhone. And when she finds it, she alerts everybody on the search party, says, hey, I found a phone. They're like, don't touch it. The police later come and pick it up and take it in as evidence. And she states that she found a rose gold iPhone. And the sheriff's office claims that they took into evidence a gold iPhone. Now, regardless of if the phone was rose gold or if it was gold, whatever phone ended up in evidence and sent to a forensic lab turned out to be Tom's phone. Now, how it got there and the fact that it was in mint condition.
Yes.
Like someone like Tom had.
Huge.
Yeah, that's red. That's like red flags everywhere that this phone is found. Now we're almost at a year.
Yeah,
this phone would have been sitting out in the elements for a year.
Right.
But it was in perfect condition.
In a ditch that was recently mowed.
Yes, by the tractors with the huge brush hogs on the back of them.
That's right, yeah.
That would have taken this phone and just shredded it into bits on the side of the road.
It would have been sucked up into them blades and just turned into mulch.
Yeah, you would have never found it. So that begs the question, how did this phone get out there? And why was it still in mint condition?
It's in mint condition. I mean, it was out there in the elements for almost a year, so this is in October?
This is October 14th, 2017.
Yeah, so almost 11 months.
Yeah, we're 11 months away.
If we are to assume it's been there the entire time, which I certainly do not.
I do not.
But it's found in perfect condition. Now,
which it could not be.
Which it could not be, because we know that, because the backpack was out there for 2 months with a laptop in it, and the laptop was destroyed.
Like, literally sent to a forensic lab, and the forensic lab said, this thing is trash.
Right. Now, this phone, 11 months almost later, I'm sorry, I said that weird. Almost 11 months later, this phone is sent, and they can confirm it is in such good condition, they can tell that it's Tom Brown's phone.
Yeah. The glass isn't cracked. Nothing's, it's not, literally, it looked like someone had took a phone out of their pocket, pitched it on the ground, or showed up hours or 24 hours or less before, and tossed it out in the general area of where this search was supposed to be. Because one of the things that's talked about this phone, because when this gets brought up, now everybody starts saying, okay, well, how did this phone end up out here? One of the theories that comes up is that, well, it had to be planted by somebody,
right?
Which 100%, in my opinion, had to be planted by somebody.
I also believe that.
But who was it? So some people start saying, well, and the deputies, and I think Pine Gregory and another deputy at Hemphill County, or it could have been a different deputy, when they start getting into all the names of the people, it starts to get confusing even more because this is so confusing. So let's take Pine Gregory out of this equation.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say a deputy at Hemphill County made the statement, and Sheriff Lewis, former Sheriff Nathan Lewis, also confirmed later, supposedly, that at some point in time, Penny, a few months after Tom went missing, had texted some of Tom's friends' parents and friends and said, hey, by chance, do you know the code to Tom's phone? And everybody checks back and says no. The phone that was found did have a lock on it, so that they couldn't get into it at first. They had to crack it and get into the phone. So then everybody's like, why would Penny ask several months after Tom went missing if anybody knew the code to his phone? It's saying that she had the phone.
It does, but also...
But she's got a response.
Oh, okay.
So, when she was asked about this, she said that one of the deputies at the sheriff's office sent her a message and said, do you know the passcode to Tom's phone? And she said, no, I don't. And that person said, can you ask around and see if anybody knows the code to the phone in case we get additional information, which is hard for me to get to, because if I was the parent, I would have been like, why do you want the code to his phone?
I also would have.
You have his phone?
Yeah.
So somewhere in there was a reason given why this code needed to be found.
Is that confirmed?
And so which part?
That she heard that from someone at the...
No. The only part that can be confirmed about this is that Penny asked the friends and the friends' parents about the code.
So she doesn't have any way...
She doesn't have any way to prove that it was an actual... What she says is that a deputy asked her to get the code.
Well, okay.
But she doesn't have any correspondence between her and the deputy showing that actually happened.
That's bizarre to me. So, no matter who's asking for that, it's strange to me because the phone is not in possession that anyone knows.
This phone would not be found for another 6 months.
Right. That's very
according
bizarre.
To this timeline.
So if you get onto like somebody's like Apple account,
it's a different password.
Okay. That's exactly where my brain went. Would it be needed to do like a Find My iPhone?
No, normally you would have to sign into, like, say if I lost my actual phone, I can log on to like Apple's website, put in my Apple ID, and then use my Find the Phone that way. But if I was going to do it like off my, say like my wife's phone, since we shared that ability with each other, I could just literally get on there, click my name, and then find it.
So we know.
But if it's turned off,
so
it will show you the last known ping location, which circles us right back around to 0.
I knew that part. I'm just wondering, is there any other reason to know the phone's unique passcode?
Not that I can think of.
Exactly. It's exactly what I was getting at. I'm getting at is that is a weird thing to ask if you do not possess the phone, because it's the only thing that it goes to.
Yep.
And which we just talked about. Yeah, that's really shady. And the fact that we know that she did ask those questions, and if somebody asked her to ask those questions, that's equally shady, but we don't know that for sure. We just know that's what she said.
Yes. And it would make sense to me that here's kind of where I thought about that. If Penny had the phone, then she always had the phone. So why would you wait until months later to go ahead and see if you could get into the phone? But if the sheriff's deputies found the phone in the vehicle, then they also always had the phone. So why would these questions be asked later on down the road if someone had the phone this entire time?
And then drop them in a ditch. And
then drop the phone in the ditch without ever even...
Why even, if somebody did have the phone, why even get rid of it? Why not smash it with a hammer and bury it? Burn it in a barrel?
Yeah. The only thing that I can think of is that someone was either trying to lead them down the path to where Tom would later be found.
Yeah, because that is the next thing we're going to talk about.
Yeah. We're heading in that, from the backpack to the phone to the body. We're heading in that direction.
We are. That is very suspicious.
But why would you want them to find it then? Why is all this happening at this point in time? Why is there a conversation about the phone and then the phone's found? Because in my opinion, whoever has the phone has always had the phone. They didn't have it in evidence. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they could have had it in evidence for 2 months, and someone's like, "Hey, Bill Bob, you ever look at that phone to see if there's anything on it?" Someone's like, "Nah, it's dead."
You didn't charge it?
Well, charge it up and look. I have no idea.
Yeah, we don't. No. There's very little released about it. If that was something about any of the details of this case, let alone where if this phone was even in somebody's possession in an official capacity.
Exactly. Yeah. Because the sheriff's office, and this goes back, we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, but the sheriff's office never logs that in as evidence. And that's also why I feel like if the sheriff's office did have it, and then they did ask for the number later on down the road, and then they realized, like, hey, we don't have an evidence log for this. There are a few simple ways that you can kind of get around that. You can backdate an evidence log, but put in your report that it was not put on the original evidence log. And tie that back together. If it ever goes into a court case or anything like that, which later on down the road could make you look a little foolish.
Sure.
But in this instance right here, there's no reason why you couldn't backdate an evidence log and put in your report that this phone was found at this time on this date, and it did not make it onto the evidence log. Tied up and done.
Yeah, that would require somebody taking responsibility for that.
Yes. And we already know that there was a supplemental report from Nathan Lewis about the event that supposedly was entered in as happening as at time of, but was a year old. Like he had gone back and wrote a supplemental report and tried to say that it was from a certain time when it was not.
A year,
at least.
Holy get you fired.
That will get you fired. That should get you fired.
Certainly should.
And there's also been some other things that happen as far as logs and other training logs, evidence logs that come back to bite old Nathan Lewis in the butt.
Yeah, but we'll get there.
And could have that just been error? Absolutely. Do police officers make errors like that?
Of course.
Of course they do. However, just like Mike stated, you have to accept responsibility. Put it in the report and move on, because once you do that, you're covered. You're good. Doesn't make you look foolish. Depends on what happens.
That's right.
But you know what? You're covered. not only from a standpoint of the ethical kind of ramifications of this,
Yeah.
but in a legal way too, if it ever gets to that point.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to make mistakes. People in law enforcement are no different. What makes a difference is if you say, "Oh, I messed this up. I need to go fix it," and you do that in an official capacity as well.
You make it right. But that's not what happens. So, October 14th, 2017, the phone is found. Now we're going to fast forward to January 9th, 2019. So not only has an additional year and several months passed since the phone was found, but we're over 2 years past Tom actually being missing. And on this particular date, there is a Hemphill County deputy, which I'm pretty sure was Pine Gregory. And this is where I'm saying, like, we find the backpack on Lake Marvin Road. Several miles down the road, the phone's found. And then several more miles down the road when you get to Lake Marvin, in a semi-secluded area with trees and other things, this guy's casually walking.
Just bebopping around on duty looking for buck sheds.
Just looking for some buck sheds. And he's like, "Hey, that looks like a skull," or whatever. And then so he calls out. They send somebody out. They recover the body. Or and they determine that it is a body. Later on, it's determined to be Tom. And they're like, "Holy cow. Luckily, we had a guy out there walking around on duty looking for buck sheds."
Was that the official report?
I believe so.
Well,
I believe so. At least that made it in there. But that's the thing. You can't hide that fact.
No.
And so it's weird to me that if maybe he's also the one that planted the phone, why are we getting here? Why is it that someone is trying to lead us to the body if you don't want anybody to find the body?
Well, great question. And I have a couple others before we jump into try to answer yours. What condition were these remains found?
Completely and totally. I mean, it was bones.
It was skeletonized.
Yes.
I've also have heard.
I heard they found maybe a shoe out there with it, maybe some like pieces of clothing.
Yeah.
But nothing you can look at and say like, boom, we're gonna unlock this thing.
There was I believe there were also bones missing.
Yep.
Yeah. I have heard, but I do not know anything substantiated, that there was a bunch of bones missing. Yeah,
I heard that it was a partial recovery.
Yeah.
I don't know what extent that is, but I heard it was partial.
And they identified it as Tom Brown's remains, and guess what? No bullet hole was found.
Nope. And so, suicide, well, where would he have shot himself at? If it wasn't in the head. And it's a 25 auto.
Yeah.
So you got it. We've talked about this on the podcast before. 25 auto, you got to be precise.
Yeah,
where you put that bullet.
You got to hit something vital, or on the off chance that that somebody did try to kill himself with a 25 auto and shot themselves in a non-vital area, they're going to be bleeding for a long time to die from that.
Yes. Even if it was a shot to the heart and it killed him, he would have bled out from that in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, yeah, well, into the heart, that's pretty vital. He'd be dead. I'm just saying, but there's no gun recovered there.
Nope.
There is shreds of clothing remain,
which to assume, not in no disrespect, but maybe like the coyotes got a hold of him or something.
Well, I was actually going to bring that up, and of course, we don't mean any disrespect to Thomas Brown's memory, but on Wednesdays, I travel to Shamrock and Wheeler. And I know that from Shamrock to Wheeler, there's nothing but farm fields, as you can imagine. And there's a bunch of cattle.
Yep.
And one week, I drove by. So, not this week, but last Wednesday, I drove by and there was a dead cow. It was just, from where I could see, it looked like a little black hump. But as I went more perpendicular to it, I could look out, and it was clearly a cow that had passed away from whatever reason. When I drove by it today, 7 days later, that cow was almost bones except for the skull.
Yeah.
They had been stripped.
Yep.
And for people that don't really know how it works out in the country, that will happen.
Absolutely.
So let's say this is, and back into this scenario, this is where Thomas Brown passed away for whatever reason. You would absolutely not find all of his remains. If this is a secluded place out in the, let's call it the woods, or out in the wilderness, next to a water source, I totally understand. I know it sounds shady, and I've talked to people that are like, well, they didn't find all his bones, implying that maybe his body was moved. And maybe it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can tell you, if somebody did pass away out in the wilderness, which is, I think, is going to qualify here, you would not find all their bones.
No.
There would be all manner of critter.
Yep.
Going
to come and do what they do. And that's a good point, because I was going to circle back to that later on with the body, saying that there are some people that speculated that it was moved and placed out there based on that, but you covered it right there, and a great job at that too, because that is a great example.
Yeah.
The cow example is a great example, because that literally happens to every living thing out in the wilderness.
Oh yeah, it was
somebody comes by and snacks on it. It doesn't matter what it is.
No, and it's going to be all manner of things, not to mention insects, weather itself, and stuff like that. Yeah, is it gross? Sure, but if a body sat there for long enough, it's now a food source.
Yes, exactly. So once they, like we mentioned, once they find the body, there's no additional evidence to say what happened to Tom, but what we do know for a fact at this point in time is Tom is dead.
That's right.
And that something happened to him. And this goes back to kind of the way we're kind of skirting around the fact that, okay, now for sure, because we already knew that the body was found when we started recording this podcast, but now we know for sure Tom did not leave town. We know that for sure.
That's
so
right.
All of the stuff about, well, he skipped town and went over here or left with these people or whatever, that's gone.
Yep.
And now we know that Tom's body was 14 miles away from where his car was.
That's right.
So if we go on this suicide theory, then now we're even further away from the backpack. Now we're even further away from the phone. And we also don't have anything explaining either A, how he got out there, or B, how he died.
That's right. Those are totally just up in the air now.
Yeah. And so the suicide thing, in my opinion, if not before, which in my mind, I had already wiped that off the table, but we need to go ahead and wipe that off the table, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's say he did kill himself, and he went to this location to do it. How did he get there?
Yep.
Because if he parked his car, even if it was, when's the last time you've seen driving 5-something?
And so I was about to say that. So the last time it was seen driving is at 5:56 a.m. So he would have had to have walked out there after that, during the daytime.
Right.
And not only that, but he would have been walking. He would have been en route to location when the helicopter was in the air.
That's right. So chance to be seen, yes. Guaranteed to be seen, no. And also, so let's say he did do that. So
but why not move in the cover of night?
Yep. We walked 14 miles. It's daylight. He can see. It's cold. But you know what? He knows he's going there for a reason, no matter how dark it is. Say he does do that. How does he do it?
Yeah.
Because there's no
weapon recovered.
There's no weapon recovered. There's no obvious signs of what did kill him.
Yeah. And I don't mean to sound any certain way here, but just talking through this, you mentioned there was no gun found. Okay. Well, then there was also no knife found, and he obviously did not hang himself in a tree.
Yeah,
because somebody would have saw him.
There's no rope found.
No rope found, and when they started looking for him, there have been several reports saying that people drove out to Lake Marvin.
Yeah,
and so if he would have done one of these things, especially if you say any sort of hanging or something like that, well, number one, how would he accomplish this? And two, somebody probably would have seen him.
Yes.
So you can move that off the table. He obviously did not skip town because he's found outside of town, not with his vehicle. The backpack's in a different location. The cell phone's in a different location. The body's in a different location.
Yep.
This all to me says that whatever happened to Tom was done, whether it was intentional or by accident, but someone made an effort
That's right.
to try to cover up what happened to him.
I 100% believe that. And the thing that really gets me thinking about it, when I get in this mode, I realize that sounded kind of weird, but you know what I mean, is somebody knows.
Yep.
Somebody gets up every morning, goes about their life, goes to bed, still alive, in Canadian Texas right now, that knows what happened and isn't saying anything. And I believe that down to the very core.
Yep.
There's no way that he ended up there and his vehicle ended up 14 miles away, obviously in a suspicious place meant to hide it, with blood found in the vehicle, however small drop or smear it was, doesn't matter. Something happened to him and somebody knows, and we're just trying to figure it out because his family deserves to know.
Exactly. And saying that, in my opinion, I mentioned there were 4 possibilities of something that could have happened to Tom. The first one being suicide, the second being some sort of friend or known person, the third being family, and the fourth being law enforcement. We covered the suicide angle, I think, enough to where, in my mind, we can take that off the table as a possibility. But what about the rest of the things that we think of, that we've thought of so far, and all the questions that we have there? Well, you're going to have to tune in next episode.
Oh, man, it's the first time we've ever done that.
That is the first time we've ever done that. But I still have, I still have 2 pages of notes that I haven't even read off yet.
That's right, you do.
Of things and theories that we can get into as far as the friends go, and motives there, and how those possibilities can kind of take place. What could have been the circumstances of, like I said, intentional, accidental, the family dynamic to that, and how people are trying to spin a narrative that can include this family, also spin it the opposite direction and say this has to be an inside job from the cops. The cops are the ones that killed him. No, the family killed him. No, a friend killed him, but they ditched the body. Okay, we've broken out everything about those other 3 possible theories that we want to go through. But like I said, we could run a 3-hour episode if we wanted to, because I think the listeners would tune in when they had a chance. But as far as our schedule goes, the reason that we can't do that is because we have to break it. We got to break it up. Mike's got to go to bed.
Yeah.
I still got to edit this thing down.
It's past my bedtime.
Already.
Yeah.
Already. And just in case you guys are wondering, it's 7:37 p.m. right now. And it's past his bedtime.
Yeah, it is.
So we, in my opinion, that's why I said, let's do a 3rd episode. That way we can come back and we can pick it up where in these other areas where it's either friends, it's family, it's law enforcement, there's all this stuff kind of going around, but we've talked about everything that's happened and possible scenario up to the point where Tom Brown's body was found.
That's true. I think we've done a good job about that. A little bit of speculation, but you all knew that was coming. And
it's unsolved.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have another week, more than likely, before we put out this next episode we're talking about. So please, if you are a listener who has ideas or knows something that we did not include, please message us, email us, anything like that. Send anything you got, because this is something that we want. We're trying to dive into it. This is the time to get it out there. If it's something you heard, I mean, obviously don't send us a bunch of wild goose chase stuff.
Especially because we still have some angles to cover here. But if there's something that you haven't heard on here so far that you're like, hey, I really know.
Yeah, and if you do know a source, include it so we can try to get as much information out there, because this isn't something that I want to be unsolved forever. I think anybody would agree with that. They want to figure out what happened. We know now for sure that something happened to him, and somebody's got to know. So all the information we can get it out there. Message us. Besides, we like to know that people are listening. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
We had some more reviews and other things that came in, and I'll read those off on the next podcast. Just
Nice.
kind of close that up. But yeah, anybody, if you leave us a review, if you leave, we used to read those off, but they kind of got few and far in between. And I actually had someone message me this past weekend and kind of mention stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I agree with reading off those reviews. But right now on Apple, we have just dedicated Apple users. We have hundreds of people that listen to the podcast. And we're still a smaller podcast, but we're growing.
Yeah.
We're getting numbers. But if you look at the reviews, it looks like there's literally tens of people that are listening to it.
Yeah.
It looks like there's like 20 people that listen to it.
Yeah.
So get on there, do the thing. I'll get to it in the outro.
Yeah, come on, guys.
So, all right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for this episode. We look forward to coming back and talking to you guys again about this because this is a good one. So we will see you guys next time on the Old Murder Project. Goodbye.
Later.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook. We are at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, we are at facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, don't forget, go on to whatever platform you're listening on, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review and hit that 5 stars.
Hit the 5 stars.
We need them 5 stars and we need those reviews.
You know what? And I love it.
Yeah, I love listening. I love hearing what people have to say about the podcast. As soon as they come in, we read them. It's awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
If you need to send us a longer form question or comment, we do have a email address that is contact@themurderproject.com. And as always, Mike or myself will get back to you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. We look forward to speaking to you in the future. But before we go, please remember,
Head up, eyes up.
stay alive.